Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine Anaya, and welcome to the Women's Eye podcast. This is where you will meet fascinating women who are leaving their mark, making a difference, and changing lives. This episode is brought to you by Casco Financial Group in Phoenix, Arizona. Catherine Scrivano is the president of Casco Financial Group. She started her business to help people create financial strength to achieve their dreams. My guest today is Lauren Schad, a professional volleyball player and activist who is using her platform to bring attention to violence against Native women. We'll talk about how she's doing that and what action you can take to help. And also, Lauren is joining us right now from France, where she plays for the top volleyball league. And Lauren, welcome to the Women's Eye podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. How is France?
Hello, thank you so much, Catherine, for that wonderful introduction. I'm very pleased to be a part of this podcast, and France is pretty good. We're still in lockdown as far as COVID, so we just finished our season, so we're just going to take some much needed time to kind of take a little bit of rest before we head into our next one, for sure.
Decompress, reset, all of those good things. You have been playing volleyball since you were 13. You went on to play for the University of San Diego and just ended your fourth professional season, as you mentioned, there in France. How did your team finish? How did you do?
Yeah, we finished really well. We ended on an 8-win game streak, I think. So we ended up on a really good note, and we secured our third place position in the top league. So we will be going to a European tournament in the next season for the next upcoming season. So very good for us, and just overall, I think good for the team and the ambiance and everyone that was a part of it.
Yes. Well, it's been a tough year for so many people, and it's nice to see that you're able to be back playing again with your team members and doing so well. So congratulations.
Thank you so much.
So I want to talk about your activism because I'm just so impressed with how much you're able to do with educating the community about such important issues on top of being a professional volleyball player. You are a citizen of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe, born and raised in Rapid City, South Dakota. In 2019, the Red Ribbon Skirt Society, also in Rapid City, asked you to serve as their first Healing the Globe ambassador for missing murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. Can you tell me a little bit about the RRSS and your role in what they do?
Yeah, of course. So Red Ribbon Skirt Society is an amazing nonprofit that was founded and started by Lily Mendoza. And it is, as mentioned, in Rapid City, South Dakota, in my hometown. And how we kind of got to working with each other was we were always trying to figure out what more we could do to bring awareness to this issue and bring education. And my mom was working really closely with Lily and just finding different ideas and brainstorming of how we could achieve that on a global scale. And that was when they asked me to be the Healing the Globe ambassador. And essentially what they do is they create a space for education and awareness, as well as creating a healing center for those who have been affected by the missing murdered Indigenous women epidemic, and how that affects those families and how we can take care of them after they have been affected by this. So it's everything prevention as well as kind of repairing and helping those families afterwards. So it's a very open space.
It's such an honor, too, for you to be included in this. As you said, you've been familiar with their work for a long time. For the purpose of this conversation, what is the meaning of Two-Spirit?
So Two-Spirit is very similar to people who don't identify with a specific sex. So it's kind of like you're taking the best points and, all those points of both genders and just non-identifying to a specific one.
Let's talk about the numbers, because you did call this an epidemic, and it still is mind-boggling, I think, for you and a lot of other people, that some people don't realize this is still happening. The numbers of missing murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people, they are staggering. According to the Centers for Disease Control, Indigenous women are nationally 10 times more likely to be murdered than any other ethnicity, 10 times. And they go missing without being properly investigated or documented. Why is this happening?
So, in my opinion, I think it's just because clearly the lack of resources that we have within the tribal sovereignty when it's separate. So a lot of these cases, either they're underreported because we don't have either, the resources that allow us to database them correctly, or as you said, people simply just don't realize it's happening. So it's just oftentimes ignored and left to kind of fend for ourselves. And it's just taken completely in a way that I can't put it any other way than to say historically as well, it's just not been taught about what is causing this, with like oil pipelines and hypersexualizations and sexualizations of Indigenous women in general within media and culture. And so because all of these are very interconnected with one another, and those have often been times, areas within Indigenous cultures that have been taken advantage of from outside, like colonialism. That's if you start with a system that is already trying to oppress these groups of people, then you're gonna just find more and more issues that are gonna be ignored from the consequences of those.
And you mentioned the education that you are involved in, and part of that is, like you said, going back and teaching some of the historical knowledge that maybe some of these young people are not being taught or are not aware of. What's the response been from the younger generation to what you're out there trying to teach them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So especially in France, so my role essentially is kind of creating a new outlook on an international scale, because we know within the United States and even in Canada, where this is also happening, that historically in schools and in any context where the Indigenous narrative is being brought to light, it is oftentimes not told from an Indigenous person. And so it becomes very sugar coated with what is actually happening to Indigenous communities. So the response that I've been getting usually is that people are surprised and they're shocked, and they almost can't believe these staggering statistics, and they don't know how to react, because they're like, this is so huge. Why is this not known? Why is this not being taken care of? And after that, it seems so overwhelmingly positive, because after they realize, like, wow, this is happening now, we need to change it and we need to fix it. And especially with the younger generation, everyone's so motivated to want to educate and bring this light to this issue. And even internationally, where there are some barriers with language and just in general, with cultural differences, they are so willing to listen and to learn and grow from these different experiences from someone who has seen it in Indigenous communities and has lived it. So it's been overwhelmingly positive, but as we know with these issues, there's always a little bit of pushback when you are standing up for something that you believe in.
Well, I admire you standing up for what you believe in and being out there at the forefront. And I understand that you dedicated each match this season to a woman or child on the ongoing list of missing, murdered, and Indigenous women by painting their name on your body. I believe it was paint, to help bring awareness to the missing and murdered Indigenous women movement on an international level, like you were talking about. What and who inspired that?
So what initially got me trying to advocate within my professional career, because for a long time I was stuck thinking that they couldn't coincide with one another, and that they kind of confronted each other and conflicted in a way that they couldn't help each other, because I was so far away from all the protesting and the marches and the legislation that was happening. So I felt a bit lost. And then I saw Rosalie Fish, who was a high school track runner, wearing the red handprint across her face, which is the symbol for missing, murdered Indigenous women. It's kind of represents that feeling that women, Indigenous women, and Two-Spirit and children have had their voices stolen and taken from them. And then red is the color where it is known that spirits can see. So it's kind of showing them that we're here to give them their voices back and share their stories so that they will be remembered. And after I saw Rosalie Fish, an athlete, doing this advocacy, that sparked me to realize that I can have both my career and my passion, what I believe in, really work together in a cohesive way where I could make a bigger impact than I would have been able to do otherwise. So as you mentioned, for every game, me and my mom discussed what could be something where I could share a story and bring more visibility to these women and these girls and these two spirits. And we came up with the idea of sharing a story and a name for every match, which I usually have 1 to 2 a week. So then it's you're just showing representation, visibility for people that I have in connections where maybe they can find, like, help search for them if they see them, and just bring awareness to them and who they were, to bring honor to them and give them their voices back. So that's kind of how we got started with that.
It's so powerful. And I encourage people to go to your Instagram and see some of the pictures that you have posted with the names on your body. What kind of attention and conversation has that helped encourage? And is it what you expected?
I think everyone's been so supportive. I know my club has always tried to do what they can to help bring awareness to this issue and allow me to, like, paint names on my body or write names on my body or wear the symbols of the handprint and the red dress on my arm. So they've been overwhelmingly supportive. I have had a bit of some issues because usually within the league, you have to remain neutral. And the problem that I faced is that it was seen as a political movement rather than something that is really happening. And that is, it's not a right or wrong, it's what is happening and it's facts. And that was really hard to distinguish that and translate that to a culture that doesn't know so much about it. So we had some pushback there, but everyone else within the community, I have had journalists and people come up to me, videographers that were like, we just want to just tell us how we can help and how we can spread this message within the French community, within the region, within the country, to just do our parts. So everyone's been so helpful and so supportive and really wanting to get into sharing this message and making sure that those women are honored and brought visible towards.
That's amazing. That's just incredible. And what an inspiration you've been in terms of just creating that awareness. So for people who are listening or watching right now, who, like we talked about earlier, had no idea this was an epidemic, what action can people take right now, right this minute, to help raise awareness and amplify the voices of families and survivors to help stop this violence against Native women?
Yeah, of course. I think the best thing that they can do is educate themselves first and foremost. There are a lot of resource centers within different states and within different communities that are very accessible. And I think you could just go on the internet, look up your region and type in MMIW Resource Center or resources. And I know there's been a lot of people on the forefront that have been trying to subsidize this into something where they can go into offices and learn more about what is happening. And then after that, it's something as easy as following someone on Instagram, an advocate or someone who's out in there in the forefront, and just listening to what they're saying and taking in and retaining this information. And that's the great thing about social media, is it's one click away and it takes 1 minute. So I think like women like Ashley Collingbull, Sunny Red Bear, Rosalie Fish, Jordan Marie Daniel, like all these women who stand up for what they believe in, they are on these huge scales and they are sharing every single day what they believe in on matters in these Indigenous communities, because it's all Indigenous women that are coming together. So just giving a space for these women to speak and to listen and retain.
Absolutely. And speaking of speaking, you're also extremely passionate about helping Indigenous youth. In the off season, you've organized and hosted free volleyball camps for Indigenous youth in the Dakotas, Canada, Alaska. You're also a Nike N7 ambassador, speaking at schools and conferences in the US and also in France, advocating for Indigenous students and encouraging all youth to reach their full potential and lead healthy lifestyles, which I think is so amazing. N7 is more than just a clothing line. I mean, this is a nonprofit, right?
Yes, it's a nonprofit from the Nike branch that was created and founded by Sam McCracken, where they took Indigenous athletes to kind of give Indigenous communities and Native children people to look up to and show them that they can make it out of these really kind of poor situations that they're in, whether it just be like poverty stricken or the different issues that we face within rural communities. And it's giving them a chance to be seen and giving them opportunities, such as with these camps, giving them a chance to be represented on a larger scale so that they can maybe create opportunities for themselves going forward with education or whatever they choose to do. So it's really just to bring inspiration to the next generation, the 7th generation, and giving them, once again, a voice to be heard and to be seen.
And do you feel like you're being heard? I mean, what has your impact been, in your opinion, for the hundreds and thousands of youth you've been able to reach?
For sure. I think Nike and 7 was something that I was and continue to be so proud of for myself and to be honored to be a part of, because it was just something that really matched with the goals that I was trying to achieve on a smaller scale within my hometown, because these camps started with my sister working at AmeriCorps on a native reservation, and she was like, we should do one of these camps, we should do it and just put it on and see how the kids react. And it's been like 5 summers, I think now, and it's something really special to see these girls, especially because I work primarily with young women, but I also work with some boys here and there. To see them come up and talk to me years later and say like, hey, I got recruited to this school, or I really remember everything about your camp, and reaching out to me if they need help. And I think that's the best part about it, is making and creating these relationships with this generation and making sure that they have opportunities just as I had growing up, and just wanting to be very at their disposal for any help that they need. So it's really great to hear their feedback and see how they're taking exactly what they're good at and just rolling with it and succeeding. And that's the best part about all of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm always constantly amazed by your generation and the generation after you. What lessons or values do you try to share with the next generation?
Yeah, so I think what I've always been told is to just remain humble in whatever you're doing. And that's a really big part of our culture. And so is education. And in the end, it's all about community and how we can support one another. And that's my favorite part about being an Indigenous woman, is the community I have surrounding me. And so when we're in these camps and where we're talking with the next generations, we're always talking about how can we better not just ourselves, but the people around us and the world around us, because we have to take care of Unchimaka, or Mother Earth, and just how we can leave this place better than when we first came here, and when we leave, and just making a really impactful mark on people's lives and also the earth. So it's kind of just all of those values coming together, and then creating that with opportunities and their passions and what they believe in.
Your passion certainly comes through. You are so eloquent and so passionate in everything that you are talking about and how you go about talking about that. What are your ambitions beyond sports? Do you have any political ambitions, or, any further educating ambitions?
For sure. I think, I always get these questions like, what's next after volleyball? And I'm like, we'll see how long my body lasts. But it's always something where I think it's going to be very organic. I can't exactly say what's next for me, but I think it'll come in a very natural way. I know I've coached a bit, and I know I love volleyball. So maybe going back and giving back to those communities that I've been able to work with, I would love to do that. And work within these marginalized groups of people where they need voices and they need people to help them and bring them up. And I would love to be that person just as a mentor. So I know that I would like to work within my Indigenous communities and give back to them as much as I can. I will probably go back to school at some point, because I think we can always continue to learn. I got a bachelor's in anthropology, so I would like to use that probably within some type of nonprofit network, and just as I said, just kind of continue the work that I've been doing within my professional career, just without, a crazy schedule of practicing every day.
Yes. Well, you've been able to, so it seems, balance it pretty well. You should be proud of yourself for that.
Thank
Before
you.
I let you go, I do want to talk about real quickly the social media hashtags, because you did talk about the importance of social media, especially in
Yes.
this movement and creating awareness. And I know there are several hashtags that people should be using. And if they're not using it, but they want more information, they should certainly be following. Can you talk a little bit
Yes.
about that?
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. With these hashtags, I know even on my page, you don't have to necessarily be following certain people, but if you want to get information about these, the key ones are hashtag MMIW. You could have MMIW C for children and the number 2 plus S for Two Spirit. Hashtag no more stolen sisters. And then hashtag we won't be silenced are usually the 3 or 4 main ones, where if you just even follow one of these, you will be over, like, you will have enough information to last you, because people are constantly posting about it. And I follow the MMIW one, and at least I get 20-30 posts a day, either about a specific person or even marches or rallies that are happening in certain areas. So it's a great resource to stay up to date on everything that is happening.
Wonderful. Well, Lauren Schad, it has been a pleasure getting to know you. Thank you so much for your activism and raising awareness about the violence against Native women, and for inspiring the next generation of athletes and leaders and advocates. I'm just really excited to see, what happens in your next chapter whenever you get to that.
No, I just want to say thank you so much for having this podcast and everything that you do that gives these voices a platform to be heard on. And I think that's so important. And I am just so honored to be a part of it, and that you asked me to come on here. So thank you so much. And for, helping be a part of this movement and making change.
Well, thank you. Thank you for all you do. And I want to let people know they can learn more about you by going to our website at thewomenseye.com. I also want to let everybody know that The Women's Eye has a book. It's called 20 Women Changemakers. You can shop for it wherever you buy books, and of course at changemakersbook.com. Also, our newest book, 20 Women Storytellers, is coming out soon. You can find more about that at womenstorytellersbook.com. That's going to do it for this episode of the Women's Eye podcast. Lauren, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me from France, where it's much later than it is here.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining me, everyone. I'm Catherine Anaya. Until next time, remember, it's the world as we see it.